Buenos días, estamos muy contentas de continuar con esta celebración de los 50 años de Chamela. En esta ocasión tenemos una presentación de lujo. Me da muchísimo gusto que tengamos aquí a la doctora Pengjuan Zu. Ella es una joven investigadora que actualmente trabaja en Suiza. Pengjuan Zu hizo su licenciatura en China, en la Universidad de Beijing, en la Universidad Normal de Beijing. Posteriormente hizo una maestría en Ecología y Conservación en la Universidad de Uppsala, en Suecia, y el doctorado lo hizo en la Universidad de Zurich, en Ecología Evolutiva. Posteriormente, hizo varios postdoctorados, en primer lugar en el Royal Botanical Garden de Kew, en la sección de Ecología Química. El segundo postdoc que hizo fue en el MIT, en el área de Ecología Estructural, y un tercer postdoc en Suiza, en la Universidad de Zurich, en Ecología Global y Biodiversidad. Y después empezó a trabajar en otra institución, ahí mismo en Suiza, que se llama EWAG, y desde hace unos pocos meses está trabajando en el Instituto Tecnológico de Suiza, en el ETH, en el Departamento de Ecología de la Información. Entonces, como pueden ver, Su tiene un historial de mucha diversidad. Ha trabajado en varias áreas de ecología. Está interesada principalmente en entender cómo se comunican las especies entre sí a través de algunos procesos de información. En este caso vamos a platicar sobre los volátiles. Y bueno, agradecemos muchísimo que Su pueda estar aquí con nosotros. Ella estuvo trabajando en Chamela hace un par de años en un proyecto de colaboración, y creo que su aproximación a la ecología es muy novedosa y puede ser interesante para muchos de ustedes. Entonces, sin más, pues le damos una cordial bienvenida a Su y vamos a seguir con esta celebración de los 50 años de Chamela. Muchas gracias, Su, por estar aquí con nosotros. Si quieres comenzar, now you can start, Su.
Okay. Okay. And thank you very much, Ek, for the nice introduction. Although I can catch some word, but yeah, should improve my Spanish. And thank you for the invitation. And it's my great pleasure to have the chance to give you a presentation entitled Plant-Insect Chemical Communication in Ecological Communities and Information Theory Perspective. So my research interest is at the community level, and I'm trying to integrate information theory to study plant-insect communication. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with information theory. Anyway, I will first give you an introduction on what is information theory. Then I will show you a case study that we did with the empirical work that have been carried in Chamela, to show you how can we use information theory to get new insight of communication in ecological communities. And then last, I will give you a quick flavor on my current and the future work and some vision of information theory in ecology. So first, what is information? We know that information transfers from a sender that codes the information to a receiver that decodes the information. During the process of information transferring, it mediates communication. For example, now I'm giving a presentation, so I code some information in my speech, and you hear it, and you have to decode the information that I'm transferred to interpret the talk. And the information can be coded in different ways, different channels. For example, if you are happy, you can play a music, or you can paint a picture, or you can just say, I'm happy. depend on how you code and how the receiver decodes the information, there is some messages is transferring. So is information measurable? I just want to give you a quick example. For example, if I say I'm happy, or if I say I'm happy because today we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Chamela Field Station. These two different sentences does seem to give different amount of information, even though we don't know information theory. So how exactly we can quantify the information? For this, we have to thank a lot to Claude Shannon, who, with his revolutionary and groundbreaking work, that in the 1948, that he published a seminal paper called the Mathematic Theory of Communication, where he defined that the way to quantify information is to measure what is the reproducibility of the information at one point from the other. On the other word, if the message can be reproduced better, then it contains higher information. If the message is more ambiguous, then it have lower information. So there are two ways that we can use for measure information. One is information, which quantifies how clear the information, the message or the information is. And the other is kind of the opposite, is the uncertainty or the ambiguous, how uncertain you are or how confused you are when you hear some message. And in this way, we unify no matter what channel, whether it's vocal or visual or olfactory, we unify all kinds of information into this information bits. And here is mathematical equation based on the probability of signals. I will not go in too much detail into the equation, how to quantify, but we can discuss later if someone is interested in. And then if we have an interaction matrix, like here, for example, object signal, for example, here are 3 species. And on the other dimension, we have the VOC, the volatile organic compound, from the 3 plant species, for example. And we can use this matrix to describe how the VOC is, how each species are emitting different VOCs. For example, if the first species emit VOC 1 and 2, and the second emits all the 3, and so on. So how to calculate the information? If we look at VOC 1 here, because VOC 1 is emitted by all the 3 species, by smelling this VOC, we cannot decide, or we are not sure which species we are looking. So the VOC 1 gives us very little or zero information to tell the species apart. But if we have smell VOC 2 or VOC 3, because of the different distribution of them along the species, we can get a little bit more information compared to VOC 1. So with an interaction matrix, we can calculate 2 things. One is called mutual information, which describes how much information we can gain by smelling or by knowing the other dimension or the other signals. And the other one is called the conditional entropy. It means how confused we are by knowing the other variable. And here is how we can calculate the conditional entropy and the mutual information. Another thing I want to point out is the cumulative mutual information along when we getting more and more signals. For example, if we only know one of the signal, we may just get little bit information. But if we have 2 signals or 3, or along when the number of signal increase, we get more and more mutual information until a point it saturates, meaning that by adding more signals, there will be no more gaining of the information. I will also mention it in the case study later. So here, just a quick introduction. And the information theory, it really opens a huge potential of a new direction of science, as long as there's some kinds of message that transferring from one point to another. In biology, for example, in molecular biology, neurobiology, cell biology, or species communication that I will talk more later, we can all apply information theory. But original, actually, the information theory is developed for man-made system, like in the telecommunication. And these days, we also can apply it for data compression, machine learning, and also for language. So in the ecosystem, in terms of the ecology, in the ecosystem, there are three pillars of ecosystem. They are the matter flow, the energy flow, and the information flow. The most well-known knowledge and also classic examples from textbook are the matter flow and the energy flow across the food web. We know that any living organism and also us, we need food and energy. Matter flow studies how different matter forms, such as carbon or nitrogen, passing through one to another. And the well-known law of energy flow states that in general, there are only 10% of energy passing to the next trophical level. Most are lost as heat. However, in order to find the food that we can eat or avoid the abundant thing that we cannot eat, be fed on, we have to use information. We need information to recognize the suitable things or the dangerous things. So the information flow is also very important, although it's less studied in general in ecology. So here, for example, just give you a quick idea what is information flow. Take the chemical information, for example, plant emit the scent, or we call it volatile organic compound, or the VOCs, that can be detected by the herbivore. And depend on how the VOC is, so the herbivore can decide whether they should forage on this plant or not. And there are also beautiful studies showing that the chemical information can also be overheard by the parasitoid or the predator insect of the herbivore to locate their food resource. So information in this way, they mechanistically glued the species together into the food web or ecological networks. And it can also cross multiple trophical levels. And there's actually a long history of using or introducing information theory in ecology, with Roman Maglev as one of the pioneer that trying to get new insight by introducing information in ecology. Also, current years, there's a new urge that people want to revisit the information and reintroduce them to trying to get new inspirations and understanding of our ecosystem by integrating information theory. But many of those work are theoretical or conceptual. So how exactly we can use the information theory and combine with empirical study in studying communications in ecological system? This is my main research interest. The study system that I use is the plants and the insects. we know that plants and insects, they have evolved together for hundreds of millions of years. And they are the core components for biodiversity and the ecosystem services in both natural and the agricultural systems. And the plant, they are sessile, meaning that they cannot move. So they have to use various signals for either attraction or deterring. And there are different ways of signals. For example, the visual signal, different color, or also different chemical signals. And among all those signals, the chemical communication, they are ancient and universal channel for communication. For example, even if we think about the evolution of organism, even before organism evolved to have eyes to see and ears to listen, they can already detect the chemicals in their environment and react to them. And I'm focused on volatile organic compound, as I introduced before. They are the scent bouquet from the plant. And for this signal, on one hand, the plant can emit very diverse volatile organic compound. And on the other hand, the insect are also very sensitive to detect those olfactory signals. So in general, because my aim is to study the communication at community level, in general, it's very well established of chemical communication, which is only focused on specific species. How, for example, how a plant emits using some scent signal to attract the pollinator or deterring the herbivore. So this is more mechanistic, but it is only specific species centered. And on the other hand, the network ecology, it studies the community level, but it's lacking of mechanistic understanding. It is more phenomenologically. So the idea is to combine this different discipline, and we're using the information theory to scale up the mechanistic understanding to community level. So this is the main idea of the project that I will introduce later. So the for really provide a proof of concept study, we did the fieldwork in Chemela, that there are basically just two questions that we want to ask. The first one is what? Are there some general patterns of plant-insect chemical communication at community level? And the second is why? If there are certain patterns, what are the mechanisms that drive for those patterns? As you probably heard many of talks for this symposium, so I'm also using the field site of Chemela. It's a tropical dry forest in Jalisco, Mexico. We know that tropical dry forests, they are high biodiversity hotspot. They also have high endemic species, but meanwhile face high threat to anthropogenic activities. And there have been a lot of very good study on that field site, as you have heard from other talks. And for the plant-herbivore network, we have know that there are 10 years data back then. Now I think it's 12 years data on the plant-herbivore network. And in the year of 2018, I did my fieldwork there, trying to introduce the chemical layer to this network to see how is the chemical communication shape the network in this plant-herbivore community. So here shows you the how the plant interact with the herbivores. Each of the rows are different caterpillar species, and each of the column are plant species. If it's filled with color, it means they interact with each other. The caterpillar can feed on this plant. If it's empty, then there's no interaction. So here we can see the plant herbivore network are very specialized, with many herbivores that can only feed on one plant species, and only a few of the herbivore are generalist herbivore. This pattern are also very common in general for caterpillar plant interaction network. And in addition to this network, we also collect the chemical from the leaves for the plant species that in our focus. And here is how the plant voc association looks like. We can see that they are highly densely connected with many voc that shared by many plant species. So by now we know that we have answered the first question, which are what are the patterns of the chemical communication, and we see the specialized plant herbivore network and the very densely connected plant voc network. So then the next question is why? Because they are clearly not randomly distributed. So why they connected in this way? What are the drivers for those patterns? For this, I will bring you back to the information theory. So we come up with some fitness function. And I just want to highlight the fitness function that we mean here. It's just the general description of the benefit for plant or insect. It is not the reproduction success that in general how biologist is using. So at this community level, the plant are facing multiple herbivores. And if you are a plant, your goal is to confuse the herbivore. So you want to make the herbivore decoding to be as difficult as possible. But on the other hand, if you are a herbivore, you want to use the signal, use the chemicals to locate which are your host that you can feed on. So you want the decoding to be as easy as possible. Then how can we describe this decoding process? Recall that we have this herbivore-plant interaction or AP matrix that describe the interaction, and the PV matrix that describe how the plant are coding different vocs. And then we're multiplying the interaction matrix with the coding matrix, assuming that as long as one caterpillar can feed on the plant, it must handle all the chemicals that it emits. So in this way, we get this AV matrix as the decoding matrix. And for the plant, they want the decoding to be more difficult, which means the uncertainty or the entropy. If the uncertainty or the entropy is higher, they have higher fitness. And for the animal, they want the decoding to be easier. So the higher the uncertainty, the lower their fitness. So now, how can they play the game for the plant and the insect to increase, to optimize their own fitness? Here is, in my opinion, the most exciting part of the project. So we have this simplified PV matrix, and it is the plant role to play the game. The plant can mutate one of the element, depend on one of the voc that they can mutate. For example, here, instead of plant 2 not emit the voc, now they can emit the voc. Then we fit the new matrix to the fitness function to say whether the plant get higher fitness with this mutation. If it's yes, then we take this new matrix. If it's not, then we continue with the circle to mutate another element. This is for the plant part. And for the herbivores part, of course, the herbivore cannot control the work that plant emit, but they can control the interaction that they built with the plant. So they are doing the same way with the mutation, but this way they want to get higher fitness for the herbivore. And they do this information arms race over and over again. And we want to check with this, under this theory, whether they can convert to some stable pattern and how does it fit to our field observation. So here is an illustration of the information arms race process. On the x-axis is the time step, or you can think it as the information, as the evolutionary time step. And the y-axis is the uncertainty level or the entropy level. And the dashed lines are from our field observation. And now we want to start from any random area, any random pattern of the both the coding and the decoding matrix, and we want to check under our information arms race how it involves. So here is just a quick movie to show you that they are starting from here with different design of random matrix. Now then the plant play the game to mutate some element, trying to get their higher of plant fitness, and then the animal play their role to increase their fitness. And we say that when they play this game over and over again, it becomes more or less a stable stage where they also match the pattern that we observe in the field. Here is just another illustration that they start from random, and then during this information arms race, the plant-insect interaction matrix get more and more specialized, and the plant work matrix get more and more densely connected. And not only the uncertainty, not only the entropy, also the fitness. So the lines are from our field observation. And we say that, and the stars and the cross are from our simulation. We can also say that the fitness also converge to the field pattern. Here is just a plot with the simulated uncertainty against observed. So if the dots are along the diagonal, it means it has good prediction. If it's off diagonal, then it doesn't. So here we want to test whether the proposed hypothesis is not an artifact of the model itself. So we compare with the red colored sign, which is the animal, which is our information arms race, where the animal minimize the entropy and plant maximize the entropy. And we checked it against some alternative mechanism when they both minimize or both maximize, or the other way around. And we say that only under information arms race, we can converge, we can recover the field pattern. And record the cumulative mutual information. So here, again, the black line is from our field observation, and the red color is our information arms race, and the other three colors are the alternative hypothesis. So here we can say that when the work when we're adding up more number of works, we also get higher mutual information, and the information under our information arms race, this information accumulation is increasing very fast, the same as how the field pattern is. With as long as around the 8 voc, you can already identify all the plant species in the community. So this means that if, let's say, the insects are smart enough to use the 8 most informative voc, they can already distinguish all the plant species and find their host. And this is the similar plot, but for the decoding matrix, we say again that under this information arms race, the cumulative information is recovered very well with the field observations. And also with certain amount of voc, you can tell the insect species apart. This may indicate that the information can be transferred to a higher trophical level. For example, when the predator insect or parasitoid insect, they may also use those information to identify the caterpillars. And here, just a quick demonstration of the robustness of the result, because we know that in ecological study, normally we are limited with the sample size and the data availability. So here we show that even with a subplot in our field site, we can also recover the pattern well. So the result is robust to different sampling effort. And the middle part, this figure is showing you that when we start different initial state, it all converge to the level that we observe in the field. So no matter whether you start with random matrix or very densely connected matrix or very specialized matrix or a combination of those different patterns, it doesn't matter how you start, but as long as under this information arms race, after some evolutionary steps, it all converge to the similar level as we saw in the field. Because the network have been sampled for multiple years. So here is just a quick illustration showing that we are using the network from different years. And we also can reproduce the pattern very well. So to conclude, the herbivore specialization and the plant voc redundancy pattern can be explained by information arms race between plants and herbivores. And this, we got a very nice perspective paper from Ricard Soleil on our publication. He entitled that using information theory to decode network co-evolution. Normally, when we talk about co-evolution, we think about species co-evolution, like fake wasps or some other co-evolution. But in our work, we explain at the community level, like the whole pattern of plant-insect network and the plant voc association. These two patterns can be nicely explained with our information arms race. And it is at community level, it's hypothesis driven. It's also simple, intuitive, and parameter free. We only have the parameter, we only have fixed the number of plant species and the voc species. Because we know that, and no other parameters, because we know that sometimes when you have too many parameters, you tend to fitting the model with your data instead of discovering some real mechanism, real drivers. And also the work is scalable. Although here we just showed plant-herbivore network, we could extend it to plant pollinator network, plant-herbivore parasitoid insect to adding another trophical level, and also not only for the olfactory signals, also for visual or vocal information. So this is, I think it's a very beautiful feature of information theory that it doesn't matter which trait you are looking at, as long as you translate it to some information, bit it generalized all those different traits to one similar feature. And of course, it can be applied to other biological systems. Could also apply to communication system that beside outside biology, like in social or financial systems. Yeah, so in general, we want to make a good mechanistic understanding at community level by combining functional ecology, network ecology, and employ information theory to upscale the mechanistic study. Now it's the last part. I just want to give you a flavor of, let's call it at the moment information ecology, that we introduce information theory in ecology. Some directions or some visions of information ecology. So first, we can get mechanistic understanding of the ecosystems. And as I mentioned before, that the information flow in ecological network is one of the three pillars of ecosystem, especially under global changing, when there are many threats and dangers and for the ecosystem collapse. How can we add in this missing layer to gain new side of how to more effectively to conserve and protect our ecosystem? At the moment, we tried for the plant-herbivore network and we can extend it by adding another partners or adding another trophical level. And for example, when we add in pollinator and considering both pollinator and herbivore, then on one hand, they have herbivore, which is the enemies of plant. But on the other hand, they have pollinator as their friends. So how can plant use the chemical to dealing with this dilemma of attracting the mutualistic, meanwhile deterring the antagonistic? And we also, for this part of project, we also have a beautiful field site that they translocated the whole community to a lower elevation and lower elevation, kind of mimicking global warming, to see how this climate change can affect the chemical. We could use this system to study how the climate change can affect the chemical communication at community level. And for this plant-herbivore parasitoid system, we want to use a biodiversity plot that they have different diversity with different tree species. Some are monoculture, some are with more diverse species, to kind of ask the question how the diversity loss can affect the communication pattern, and how can we use the chemical communication for some applications. Also, of course, for the agriculture system, not only in the natural system. And so this is one direction, is to extend the study to different systems. And another direction is to go deeper, to study the deeper the prediction and the forecasting. For example, because at the moment we can nicely recover the general and the average entropy of the plant herbivore network and also plant-evoke network, but we cannot predict who eats whom in the network. So in this project, we want to add in some constraints, for example, the physiological constraint of phylogenetic constraint to limit the mutation process, and then to see whether we can get a better information of who is who. So this is one way of how well we can predict. And another is how much information we need, how much is the input information that we need to predict. At the current stage, that we have to collect the work from all different individual species in the whole forest. And whether during the process of knowing better and better of the process, is it possible to just sample the air from the forest and recover some information about plant species, insect species, and their interaction? And this is a quick illustration to show that not only volatile, because I was talking the whole time of volatile organic compound, we can of course use some other traits. For example, during my work at Kew Garden, we are using sterols. Sterols, we know that cholesterol for human body, that is important. And sterol is also very interesting for plant-insect communication, because on one hand, insect, they cannot synthesize sterol by themselves. So which means they have to get them from the food that they eat, especially for bees that are pure vegetarian in a way that it feed on pollen or nectar. We know that nectar is mostly sugar and some other small things, and the pollen are very nutrient rich. But the pollen sterol in different species are very diverse. So how could this interaction is shaped? Like why there are different sterol profile in different plant species, and how insect can adapt to the different plant species. Although this study per se is not using information theory, but it's just a direction that not only evoke, but also some other chemicals and also other signal like visual and vocal for the bird communication, for example, could all be interesting to explore the application of information theory to study them. And with this, I would like to thank all my collaborators for the project that I'm just presenting today. And it's really my great honor to have the opportunity to work in Chimela and to study this beautiful caterpillars and the insect. And also thank you very much for your attention, and I wish happy anniversary for Chimela Field Station.
Thank you very much, Sue, for this wonderful presentation. It's amazing how you are able to explain this difficult theory in easy steps so we can follow you. Okay, so you have some questions, and I will put them into the screen so you can read them. Okay. So, can you read it?
Yeah. So Damien is asking, brilliant talk, Dr. Zu. Has there been any exploration regarding plant insect chemical communication in non-antagonistic scenarios? Yeah, and according to what I know, this is like the first community. Our study, the first community level exploration of the plant insect chemical communication using information theory. So I'm not aware of any, but that's very good question because we could potentially extend to that system.
Okay, thank you. Then there's another one from Karina.
Yeah. Excellent talk. For next steps, I wonder how could we incorporate the theory of nature selection into this community context? How is the ability of herbivore to locate the host selected? Yeah, that's also a very good question. So at the moment, we are focused on this like community level, but at the moment we are also working on with a few new projects, like how can we decompose to this community level to individual level and have a nice transition of this upscaling. And the idea at the moment with this, we kind of using the top-down method, assuming that whenever herbivore can feed on a plant, it has to handle the vox that it emits. But more experimentally, it will be also very interesting to have another direction of bottom up to experimentally testing how the herbivore is reacting to whichever the chemicals, so that to build the communication, which is a bit difficult for our field site setting, because to raise those caterpillars in the lab is already a very tough task. And also for the vox, we have so many variety, and you also need different combination. So there are a lot of work that we have to test by knowing the exactly decoding matrix from experimental work. But on the other hand, for other signals like the sterol that I mentioned in the end, which could be a nice system to study this bottom-up direction, because the sterols are because the insect, as I mentioned, they cannot synthesize sterol, so there must be very strong selection of different cans that they can decode. Yeah.
So there's another one from Frida.
Thanks for the conference. This topic is very interesting. How can climate change alter plant insect communication? Yeah, that's a good question. So because for the communication, we know that there's basically different ways that you want to communicate better. The first is if someone cannot hear you, for example, you can speak loud to make the information transfer more clearly. But sometimes it's not about loudness, it's about how clear your information is. So with climate change, for example, with some pollution, it may add a lot of noise in the community. So it's not, so you have to consider like how those environmental noise is changing or is affecting the communication.
But in the climate change scenario, do you think plants will emit more or less signals? What do you think will happen?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think on one hand, if the background noise is really affecting the channel, then it's better to emit more, I mean stronger. And on the other hand, like we know that volatile organic compound is also very sensitive to climate per se. Like the higher temperature it is, it also emit more. But yeah, a lot to explore. But there was some study of the bird communication, I think last year or recent years, that it shows that because of the noise of human society, that they tend to like sing louder. Yeah.
Well, I guess one example of this is with the fireflies, right? That, I mean, because they emit light in these urban environments, they are just losing the signal. And then, but I wonder if they are, I mean, maybe you would expect that they increase their light intensity or something like that to be able to, or something like that. Maybe we can explore that for the fireflies. Yeah, but
so interesting.
You said you are already doing an experiment regarding climate change, right? In Switzerland. So do you have some preliminary results about that project or not?
We have just done some pilot experimental this year, this summer, to collect some data, but I haven't analyzed anything yet. Yeah. So
you have two communities, one in the climate change scenario and the other one in the normal place, or is only the one that you translocated? Are you
it's the one that the idea is to compare the one that translocated and compare them to the local, also to the local community. So this like two way of comparing, like with their original habitat to the transplanted one and transplanted one with their local community. Yeah.
I see. And coming back to Chamela, do you think that if we sample like the whole community, all the plants, will we get different results?
I think from our robustness test, it seems it's quite stable. Like in a way, if we use the current sample size or a subplot, it doesn't affect. So I would assume if we scale up, it could also remain the same. But the differences with the number is that it may, like the field observation may not stay as the level as with fewer species. It may increase or decrease a bit, or depend on the balance of plant species and herbivore species. That may change. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how this can replicate in other systems or in other types of interactions. I think that's very interesting. You have many comments of nice talk and excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
You can see them afterwards at YouTube.
Sure.
But there's no more questions. Does anyone has one? ¿Más preguntas? ¿Alguien que quiera hacer otra pregunta en español puede ser y yo la traduzco? Si están interesados en preguntarle algo en particular a la doctora Zu.
If there is still time, I may as well show a few more slides, because some people was asking me, like, yeah, we are using VOC, but how do you know how stable is the VOC? Like, why you think you can use that as information? So here is just a few slides, which is related to my PhD work, that we are using Brassica rapa, this fast-cycling Brassica rapa species, and we carried out some experimental evolutionary study to see how the flower scent will, how heritable is the flower scent and how it can evolve when you have different pollinator or caterpillar as a selection agent. So in order to make sure that we can use plant scent as information currency, we should make sure that the flower scent are communicatable, which there are already a lot of beautiful studies showing that how the insect using the work to approach or avoid some species. And I think the most spectacular example is one of the most spectacular example would be the sexual deceptive orchid, that the orchid can emit some scent which is quite similar to the female hormone of some insect species to attract the male species to come. So and of course, many generalized pollination systems also show that the work are communicatable between plant and insect. And the second is how stable it is. So it means like whether the works are always there in the market. And biologically, we need to ask the heritability of flower scent. And the third one is how invulnerable it is, meaning that if the market environmental is changed and can plant scent also adapt to it. So for this, I have done some artificial selection experiment to estimate the heritability. And my colleagues, they have using different selection agents like bumblebee or hoverfly or caterpillars to see how the work bouquet is involved after a few generations. So here is just the quick result of the artificial selection experiment. The dot line is the control group, and the dark colored line is the one I artificially select strong emitted compound plant. And the lighter color line is when I select for the lower emitting amount of the work. So you can say that they do like go diverge to different direction when you artificially select them, which indicate there are certain heritability of flower trait. And with the calculation, it's around 20 to 40% of the heritability. And from my colleagues, here are the different experimental evolution. Like the black one, the original population, and the blue one is under bumblebee selection. And here the green is the bumblebee and caterpillar, and here is only caterpillar. Also some control from artificial, from like hand pollination. So you can see that it start to involve in different directions when the market is changing, when the selection agent is different. Yeah. And here is another current project with Ag that we're trying to explore the agriculture system with this MUPA system, and to see how the chemical communication works in this system. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue, for sharing all this. You have one more question that just arrived. Let's see.
Sure. What do you expect from this interaction in the next few years? What do you think? Yeah, that's very good question. So at the moment, so the few slides I showed you just now is small experimental evolution study or evolutionary study that we follow multiple generations. But the work that we did in Chamela is more ecological study that you have only one snapshot and to see how it looks like. It will be very exciting to combine both sides for this ecological evolutionary study. And actually, yeah, it's nice that we had multiple years of plant insect network there in Chamela, but it's a pity that we haven't collected the chemical layer in the past years. It would be nice to, if there's additional funding, that we could follow up the study for the next years also to see how it looks like. But from the robustness test, it seems like with previous years, we could also use the information arms race to recover the pattern. So there are some kind of stable features there. Yeah, but yeah, of course, it's nice to have the real-time measurement to really double check how it will evolve.
Great. Well, there's other comments like increíble todo, muchas gracias. So they are congratulating you.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you very much, Sue. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros, continuando con el 50 aniversario de la Estación de Biología de Chamela en el Instituto de Biología de la UNAM. Los esperamos en media hora, ahora que comiencen las charlas. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Sue.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there's new comments. Wait. One more. Last one.
Can we use AI technology to fine-tune the communication of science? Oh, that's a good question. So it's about communication of science, not instead of plant-insect communication. Yeah. What is AI technology? Oh, IT. Oh, I'm not sure whether I get the question.
Well, I don't know. Jordan, can you explain a bit more? Well, I guess he wanted to say that if we can extrapolate some of these patterns of communication about, with the generation of science and the public, how can we translate this message?
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting topic, because I think information transferring is more like, how you code the information and how others can decode the information. For the communication of science, especially now during pandemic, it seems like we should improve a lot of communication. So how could I code the information in a more clear way to transfer that? And not only that, because for communication of science, there's also social effect, which means you should not only think about the clearance, of course, the clearance, but beside that, also how the people, from the decoding part, what is a more acceptable way or a more easy way for them to accept the fact that you want to transfer. Yeah.
So he wrote this to explain a bit better what you are saying, no? So how can we imagine an abstract, and how can we make abstracts better for people to understand better, no? So this way of increase our level of communication with the general public.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be too abstract, right? Maybe more detailed and more clear. Yeah,
something like that. Well, I think now we don't have more questions. So thank you very much again, Sue, and we really appreciate that you were willing to give this talk. And muchas gracias a todas y todos por estar aquí con nosotros. Y nos vemos en unos minutos en la siguiente transmisión.
Okay. Bye.